For decades, certain types of tools have been trusted by American carpenters to the point where they are considered professional standards. No big advertising campaign, no influencers. There's only one simple fact: they work well, are durable, and rarely break down. But then something strange happened. Those tools are no longer available on the shelves, no major announcements, there was no formal goodbye, they just disappeared. Following the trail, we uncovered a series of decisions that few people noticed: acquiring businesses, moving factories, cutting costs, and profit pressure from Wall Street. On paper, everything seems reasonable, but beyond the carpentry workshop, the consequences are very clear. The remarkable thing is, the brands are still there. The logo is still familiar. But the product that carpenters once swore by is not. So, who exactly made these decisions? And why do tools built to last a lifetime no longer have a place in the modern economy? We started with legendary names. In the world of carpentry, there's an almost universally accepted saying: if you could only keep one tool, keep a good hand plane. And for nearly half a century, the name most often mentioned has been Stanley bedrock and the Bailey-era hand planes, tools that many woodworkers believe will outlast their owners. On the outside, it just looks like a rusty old block of metal. But if you look closely, like an investigative journalist following business records, you'll see a nearly extinct production philosophy. The body is cast from thick iron, heavy as an anchor, enough to absorb vibrations. The frog assembly is precisely machined and so securely fixed that when the blade touches the wood, it doesn't vibrate, just like placing your entire hand on a stone tabletop. Steel blades stay sharp for a long time, not the kind of sharp when you first buy them, but sharp enough that you forget the last time you sharpened them. That's why carpenters don't consider this plane to be a consumable item. They see it as a long-term relationship. Set it up once, use it for decades. When it operates, it cuts wood so smoothly that many people compare it to a knife gliding through a stick of soft butter in the morning kitchen, effortlessly and without hesitation. So the question is, if it's so good, why can't you buy it anymore? When tracing the history, the story isn't in the carpentry workshop, but in the boardroom. Stanley, once a purely professional tool company, has become a public corporation. And then, the measure of success changes. A plane that can last 40 years is like a car that never needs replacing, great for the user, but a nightmare for recurring revenue. In financial terms, it's a non-expandable product. Gradually, the build it once, build it right criterion was replaced by build it cheaper, sell it faster. The gang is thinner, wider tolerances. Processing time is shortened. On the catalog, the name Stanley is still there, but in real life, the feeling of your tongue touching wood isn't the same as it used to be. This isn't a noisy collapse, no scandals, no tragedy announced. It was just a product line that was too good, quietly removed from the list because it didn't fit an economy that needed you back at the cash register sooner. So, in your opinion, is the fault with the tool or with the way we measure the value of a product? And if Stanley Bedrock was the first victim of this transformation, how many other legends have disappeared in the same way? Next on the list, the hand saw, once dubbed the sound of America. For nearly a century, if you walked into any serious woodworking shop in America, chances are you would see the same familiar image: a Distone hand saw hanging on the wall, its wooden handle darkened by sweat and time. No need for a large logo, no need for advertising. Just by looking at the saw blade, the carpenter immediately knew this is the real deal. Distone didn't dominate the market through quantity, but through professional trust. Each saw was created during a time when saw teeth were not mass-produced and forgotten, but were hand-filed one by one, refined for their intended use, crosscut or rip, soft or hard wood. The saw is tuned just like an instrument is tuned, and when it cuts, the sound is even smooth, like the sound of a smooth zipper on an old leather jacket. Distant steel is thin but strong, flexible enough not to warp, yet it still retains its sharpness. The wooden handle is designed to be so ergonomic that the craftsman can saw for hours without getting wrist fatigue. Most importantly, the saw is not considered a consumable item. It can be sharpened, adjusted, and even revived after decades of use. A good distant saw isn't measured in months or years, but in generations. So what happened to this king? As we trace the company's history, the picture begins to change. Diston was sold, then changed ownership again. Each handover shifts business priorities. Meanwhile, power tools exploded in popularity. Chainsaws are faster and louder, but suitable for mass production and tight deadlines. Hand sawing, which requires skill, patience, and a gradual feel, is being labeled as outdated. The problem isn't that Diston made saws of lower quality. The problem is that a saw that lasts 30 years is no longer suitable for modern profit models. It doesn't generate recurring revenue. It doesn't encourage new purchases. And in financial spreadsheets, such products are like a mechanical watch in the age of smartwatches. Admirable, but difficult to scale. And so the legendary handsaw line was discontinued. No farewell, no final version of the campaign, just a big name quietly disappearing from the catalog. Today, if you want a genuine Diston saw, you have to look in flea markets, private garages, or among restorers. The question is, have we truly progressed, or have we simply become more accustomed to discarding things faster? And if a saw designed to last a lifetime is discarded, what does that say about what the modern economy considers valuable? Next will be a tool that doesn't use electricity or batteries, but once gave the craftsman a feeling of absolute control. If a Stanley is the symbol of durability and Diston is the standard of refinement, then Miller's Falls represents something even rarer, a feeling of absolute control. Before lithium batteries and high-speed motors existed, the Miller's Falls hand drill was a tool that made carpenters feel like they were having a dialogue with the material rather than commanding a machine. At first glance, it looks unbelievably simple, but when you turn the hand crank, you'll understand why many people call this mechanical poetry. The gears mesh smoothly and evenly, like a Swiss watch. Each rotation transmits power directly to the drill bit, with no lag or interference. You feel every grain of wood, every subtle change in the material, just like driving a manual car on a familiar road. Everything is in your hands. That feeling is what made Miller's Falls a favorite tool in many woodworking shops. No battery to drain, no motor to overheat, no buttons to break unexpectedly. If you need a comparison, a Miller's Falls hand drill is like a good fountain pen, slower, but every stroke is intentional. A worker can drill hundreds of holes in a day and still feel in control of the pace of work. So why did such a sophisticated tool disappear? The answer, once again, is not in the workshop, but on the balance sheet. Miller's Falls underwent acquisitions and mergers, and in the process, product lines requiring precision manufacturing, low profit margins, and niche markets gradually became difficult to explain to management. Meanwhile, electric drills emerged, faster, easier to use, and most importantly, easier to sell. In modern business language, a non-electric tool is a product that is difficult to scale. It doesn't generate ancillary revenue. It doesn't force users to upgrade. And it's not suitable for a world where performance is measured by speed of completion, not perceived quality. Thus, hand cranking gradually came to be seen as something for nostalgia rather than a skill. Miller's Falls did not collapse. It was only pushed to the sidelines when sensitivity and subtlety were no longer considered competitive advantages. Today, if you want to experience that mechanical poetry, you have to seek out vintage and restored items, places where the value lies not in the new box, but in the history of use. The question is, have we truly become more efficient, or have we simply accepted the trade-off of a sense of ownership? And if a tool that once gave the craftsman complete control is removed, how much other value is being left behind? Next, when the trust of the American working class was once guaranteed by a name, and then that very name changed. If Stanley is a story of engineering durability, and Diston is about handcrafted refinement, Craftsman is something entirely different. Trust, for decades, to the American working class, Craftsman was more than just a tool. It was a promise. You buy it at Sears, bring it home, and if it breaks one day, they'll exchange it for something else. No cumbersome paperwork, no argument. It's like a handshake between the seller and the manual worker. Craftsman has never claimed to be perfect, but it's honest. The screwdriver might get scratched, the wrench can be heavy, but it won't betray you in the middle of work. For many mechanics, carpenters, and home repairmen, the Craftsman tool set is like a familiar work shirt, not pretty on the runway, but reliable enough to wear every day. So, what happened to this icon? When we followed the trail, we didn't find a moment of collapse, but rather a series of reasonable adjustments on paper. Sears is weakening, global supply chains are expanding, production is outsourced to reduce costs. Each decision, if viewed in isolation, makes sense. But cumulatively, they gradually erode the most intangible thing, the feeling of being made by people just like you. Craftsman once tried to reverse the situation. Efforts to bring production back to the US were announced, featuring robots, modern production lines, and the promise of Made in USA returning. But the harsh reality quickly became apparent. High cost, complex operation, it's difficult to expand the scale in a market where consumers can compare prices with just a few taps. Honesty turns out to be a financial burden. And so Craftsman found itself in a dilemma. If production is cheaper, they retain market share but lose their identity. If they stick to the old standards, they will struggle to survive in an economy measured by quarterly profit margins. The brand is still alive, the logo is still familiar, but the experience is no longer the same as before. Craftsmen today are like an old friend who has changed. They're not bad, but they're no longer the friend you used to rely on. The question is, do we really want honest tools anymore, or do we just want low prices and faster delivery? And if a brand that once represented the working class's trust can't maintain its identity, what does that say about the place of pride in modern manufacturing? Next, when we look back at all the vanished myths, the big picture begins to emerge, not just about the tools, but about how we built an entire economy. If you look at each individual case, like a Stanley, Diston, Miller's Falls, Craftsman, you might think these are just isolated failure stories, but when you put them side by side, a disturbing pattern gradually emerges. These legendary tools didn't disappear because they were inferior, but because they collided with a system that no longer had room for durability. In the modern world, value is often measured by the listed price, not the number of years of use. A tool that lasts 30 years sounds impressive, but on the shelf, it has to stand next to a version that's half the price, even though it only lasts a few years. It's like comparing a pair of handmade leather shoes to fast fashion shoes. Which one sells better? You already know the answer. First, consumers are no longer paying for durability. The problem isn't that users don't like durability. The problem is that the purchasing system doesn't encourage them to think long-term. When the decision to buy happens in seconds, 20-year durability becomes too abstract a concept to pay extra for. Second, scale and cost have rewritten the rules of the game. These legendary tools were born in an era when factories were like enlarged craft workshops. Thick steel, good steel, tight tolerances. All of these things cost time and money. But as production globalizes, every gram of metal and every minute of processing is scrutinized under the accounting microscope. To put it into perspective, reducing a small amount of material on millions of products is like taking a penny from every wallet, but it adds up to a fortune. And in that race, designs that are too robust are bound to be the first targets for optimization. Third, M&A, when identity is not on the balance sheet. On paper, mergers and acquisitions are a way to create value, but in reality, it's often an identity mill. When a brand is acquired, what is retained is the logo and market share. What's being reconsidered is everything from materials and processes to production philosophy. A plane, a saw, or a hand drill can carry decades of tacit knowledge, but those things don't have clear codes in the financial statements. And when they can't be measured, they are easily eliminated. Beside that, power tools are also changing the way people work. The advent of power tools is like the transition from handwritten letters to email. Faster, more convenient, but it also changes expectations. When speed becomes the top priority, tools that require sensitivity and patience begin to be seen as slow. The problem is that as habits change, so do needs. A generation of workers accustomed to buttons and rechargeable batteries will find it difficult to return to hand cranks and gears, no matter how good the quality is. And as demand decreases, handcrafted product lines lose their reason for existing on a large scale. What's remarkable is that many legendary tools were not only made by machines, but by humans who knew what they were doing. The way I temper steel, the way I adjust the saw teeth, the way I assemble gears, those are skills passed down orally, not always written in the technical manual. When the factory closes, when the team disbands, those skills disappear like a language with no speakers left. You can copy the shape, but it's very difficult to copy the feeling. And also, there's one final paradox precisely because they're too good. These tools are frozen out of the real market. They are hunted, collected, restored, and displayed. Prices are increasing, circulation volume decreased, and gradually, they are no longer tools but artifacts. When a hand saw or plane is in a glass case, it no longer competes with the new products on the shelf. But for young workers, that also means they never had the opportunity to experience the old standards. We didn't lose these tools because they were outdated, and it seems we lose them because they refuse to become cheap. So, the final question for you is, if all these myths disappear following the same pattern, is this still a story about the tool, or is it about how an entire economy is operating? And from that, a bigger question emerged. Is there still a way to regain the quality of old in a world that has completely changed? The legendary tools that carpenters once relied on haven't truly disappeared. They are simply no longer relevant in a world that measures value by speed, scale, and short-term profits. When a plane used for 40 years is considered inefficient, when a saw that can be sharpened is deemed difficult to expand, the problem lies not with the tools, but with the system of choosing them that we live in. The question is, do you think we've progressed or just gotten used to faster replacement? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Have you ever used or heard about these old and durable tools? If you were chosen, would you prioritize lifetime durability or affordability, convenience, and ease of resale? If you find these investigative journalism-style analyses insightful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes where we'll continue to debunk other myths that have faded into the silence. The content in the video is analytical, research-based, and commentary, drawing on public sources, historical documents, and independent journalistic perspectives. The video is not intended to attack or negatively evaluate any brand or individual, but rather focuses on analyzing economic, production, and consumption trends over time. Thank you for staying with me until the end. See you in the next videos.